Victor Castelli's empire had everything, except meaning. Then, one stormy night, a baby left in his garden shattered his empty routine. A note revealed the child was Lucia's, his lost love. Can Victor honor her legacy and learn that love is the greatest strength? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Victor Castelli stood at his office window, looking down at the city below. At 45 years old, he had everything money could buy. A mansion in the richest part of town, a fleet of luxury cars, and more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. But something was missing, and he knew it. The emptiness followed him everywhere, even here in his penthouse office on the top floor of the Castelli Tower. His assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Castelli, the board meeting starts in 5 minutes." "Thank you, Jennifer," he said, straightening his expensive tie. Another day, another meeting where he'd show everyone why he was the most powerful businessman in the city. That's what mattered, right? That's what he'd always told himself. The meeting went like all the others. Victor showed his latest plans to buy out another company, adding more millions to his fortune. The board members nodded and smiled, just like always. Nobody dared to disagree with Victor Castelli. Later that evening, Victor drove his black Mercedes through the iron gates of his mansion. The garden lights came on automatically as he pulled into the circular driveway. That's when he heard it, a baby crying. "What the—" Victor got out of his car and looked around. The crying got louder. It was coming from behind the rose bushes near the fountain. Victor walked closer, his expensive shoes crunching on the gravel path. There, wrapped in a pale blue blanket, was a baby. It couldn't have been more than a few months old. "Hey," Victor called out to his security guards. "Did anyone see who left this baby here?" The guards came running, but they all shook their heads. The security cameras hadn't caught anything unusual. Victor knelt down beside the baby. There was a note tucked into the blanket. With shaking hands, he opened it and read, "Please take care of him. He deserves more than I can give him." That's when he saw it, a hospital bracelet around the baby's tiny wrist. The name on it made his heart stop. Baby Gabriel. Mother. Lucia Martinez. Lucia. The name hit him like a punch to the gut. Memories he'd tried to forget came rushing back. Lucia's smile, her laugh, the way she used to look at him with so much love. Before he was rich, before he decided that making money was more important than anything else. Before he broke her heart and walked away. "Sir," one of the guards interrupted his thoughts. "Should we call the police?" Victor stared at the baby, at Gabriel. Those eyes, they looked just like Lucia's. "No," Victor said, "not yet. Bring him inside." The baby had stopped crying and was looking right at Victor. Without thinking, Victor reached down and picked him up. The baby settled against his chest like he belonged there. Inside the mansion, Victor's housekeeper, Rosa, took charge. She'd raised 4 children of her own and knew exactly what to do. Within an hour, she had formula, diapers, and everything else a baby needed. "Mr. Castelli," Rosa said as she fed. "Gabriel, what are you going to do?" Victor sat in his leather armchair, still holding the note. "I need to find out about Lucia. It's been 15 years since I last saw her. Why would she—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "When was the baby born?" Rosa asked. Victor looked at the hospital bracelet again. 3 months ago. He pulled out his phone and did what he should have done years ago. He searched for Lucia's name. What he found made his blood run cold. There it was, in black and white, an obituary from 2 months ago. Lucia Martinez, age 38, passed away after a brief illness. She is survived by her infant son, Gabriel. Victor felt like he couldn't breathe. Lucia was dead. And this baby, could he be? The timing fit. But even if Gabriel wasn't his son, he was Lucia's. The woman he'd never stopped thinking about, even after all these years. The woman who'd loved him when he was nobody. Gabriel started making little cooing sounds as Rosa burped him. Victor watched, feeling more lost than he ever had in his life. He was good at making money, good at taking over companies, good at being cold and calculating. But this, a baby, Lucia's baby? "Rosa," he said finally, "make up one of the guest rooms as a nursery. Gabriel's staying here tonight." "And tomorrow?" Rosa asked. Victor looked at the baby again. Those eyes, so much like Lucia's, seemed to be asking him the same question. Tomorrow, Victor said, I start finding out the truth about everything. As the night settled over the mansion, Victor sat in his study, the baby sleeping nearby in a makeshift crib. He held an old photo he kept locked in his desk drawer, him and Lucia, both young and in love, before money changed everything. Before, he made the biggest mistake of his life. I'm sorry, Lucia, he whispered to the photo. I'm so sorry. In his crib, Gabriel sighed in his sleep and Victor realized something. For the first time in 15 years, his huge mansion didn't feel empty anymore. Victor didn't sleep at all that night. Every time he tried to close his eyes, he saw Lucia's face. Around 3 in the morning, Gabriel started crying. Rosa had gone home hours ago, so Victor had to figure out what to do by himself. Okay, he said, picking up the baby awkwardly. What's wrong? Are you hungry? He tried giving Gabriel a bottle, but that wasn't it. The diaper was clean. Finally, Victor remembered how Rosa had walked around with Gabriel earlier. He started pacing the room, holding the baby against his chest. You know, he said softly, your mother used to love walking too. Late at night, when she couldn't sleep, she'd walk for hours. I used to walk with her sometimes, back when I was just a junior accountant trying to make it big. Gabriel's cries turned to whimpers, then stopped completely. That's it, isn't it? You just wanted someone to talk to you. Victor felt a lump in his throat. I guess we both miss her. Morning came too quickly. Victor called Jennifer and told her he wouldn't be coming to the office. But sir, Jennifer protested, you have 3 important meetings today. Cancel them all, Victor said. Something more important has come up. He could almost hear Jennifer's jaw drop. In 15 years, Victor Castelli had never cancelled a meeting. After Rosa arrived to help with Gabriel, Victor went to his home office and started making calls. He had investigators, lawyers, and connections all over the city. Someone had to know what happened to Lucia. By noon, the first reports started coming in. Lucia had worked as a teacher at an elementary school. She lived in a small apartment on the other side of town. She never married. 2 months ago, she got sick, cancer that spread too fast for treatment to help. Mr. Castelli, his investigator, said over the phone, there's something else. Before she died, Ms. Martinez tried to contact you several times. Victor's hands started shaking. What do you mean? She called your office multiple times over the past year, left messages with your assistant. Jennifer. She had never told him. Victor pressed the intercom button. Jennifer, get in here now. When Jennifer arrived at the mansion 20 minutes later, she looked nervous. She'd never seen Victor this angry. Why didn't you tell me Lucia Martinez was trying to reach me? Jennifer smoothed her skirt. Sir, you've always been clear about not wanting to be disturbed with personal matters. And that woman, she wouldn't say what it was about. Just that it was important. Important? Victor's voice got louder. She was dying. She was trying to tell me about my... He stopped himself. He still didn't know for sure if Gabriel was his son. Pack your things, he told Jennifer. You're fired. After Jennifer left, Victor sat at his desk, head in his hands. How many times had Lucia tried to reach him? How many chances had he missed to make things right? Rosa appeared in the doorway, holding Gabriel. Someone needs his bottle, she said. Victor looked up. The baby was reaching out toward him with tiny hands. Without thinking, Victor stood up and took him from Rosa. I'll feed him, he said. As Victor sat in his leather chair giving Gabriel his bottle, his lawyer called, Victor, I found something interesting. Ms. Martinez left a letter with her lawyer. It was supposed to be delivered to you if anything happened to her. Get it, Victor said. Whatever it costs, get that letter. 2 hours later, a courier delivered a sealed envelope to the mansion. Victor's hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in Lucia's familiar handwriting. Dear Victor, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't tell you in person. I tried so many times, but I couldn't get past all those walls you built around yourself. Gabriel is your son. I found out I was pregnant right after I got sick. I wanted to tell you, but then the doctor said I didn't have much time left. I know you're different now. I've seen you in the news, read about your success. You got everything you wanted. But the Victor I knew, the one I loved, he had such a big heart. I have to believe that heart is still in there somewhere. That's why I'm leaving Gabriel to you, not because of your money. I know you probably think that's what this is about. I'm leaving him to you because, despite everything, I believe you can love him. I believe you can be the father he needs. Please don't let our son grow up thinking money is more important than love. Don't let him make the same mistakes we did. I forgive you, Victor. I hope someday you can forgive yourself. Love always, Lucia. Victor read the letter 3 times, tears falling onto the paper. Gabriel was his son. All this time, while he was making deals and buying companies, Lucia was sick, dying, carrying their child. Gabriel made a small noise, and Victor looked down at him. Those eyes, Lucia's eyes, stared back at him. But now he could see something else too. The baby had his nose, his chin. I'm your father, Victor whispered, touching Gabriel's tiny hand. And I promise you, I'm going to do better. I'm going to be better. For you. For your mother. Outside the study window, dark clouds were gathering. A storm was coming. But inside, holding his son, Victor felt something he hadn't felt in 15 years. Hope. Rosa watched from the doorway, smiling softly. In just one day, she'd seen more emotion from Victor Castelli than in all the years she'd worked for him. Maybe this baby was exactly what he needed. Mr. Castelli, she said, should I start looking for a full-time nanny? Victor shook his head, not taking his eyes off Gabriel. No, Rosa. I'm going to take care of him myself. It's time I learned how to be more than just a businessman. It's time I learned how to be a father. Thunder rumbled outside, but Gabriel didn't cry. He just held onto Victor's finger, like he knew he was finally where he belonged. News travels fast in the business world. By the next morning, everyone knew that Victor Castelli had fired his assistant and cancelled all his meetings. The rumors started flying immediately. I heard he had a breakdown, whispered one board member to another. Maybe he's finally cracking under the pressure, suggested someone else. But nobody could have guessed the truth, that the mighty Victor Castelli was sitting in his mansion's nursery at 6 a.m., trying to figure out how to change a diaper. I don't understand, Victor muttered, struggling with the tabs. I can negotiate $1 million deals, but I can't figure this out. Rosa walked in and tried not to laugh. Here, Mr. Castelli, let me show you again. Just then, Victor's phone rang. It was Marcus Reynolds, his biggest business rival. Victor, my friend, Marcus said in that fake, friendly voice Victor hated. I heard you've been indisposed. The board is very concerned. The board? Victor's voice got hard. Or just you, Marcus? Now, Marcus laughed. I'm just looking out for the company's interests. If you're not able to handle things anymore. Victor cut him off. I'm handling everything just fine. The board meeting is tomorrow at 9 a.m. I'll be there. He hung up and looked at Rosa. I need to go to the office tomorrow. Can you? Of course, Rosa nodded. I'll take care of Gabriel. But Mr. Castelli, sooner or later, people will find out about him. Victor knew she was right. He couldn't keep his son a secret forever. But how would the business world react when they found out Victor Castelli had a baby with a poor schoolteacher, a woman he'd abandoned 15 years ago? That afternoon, Victor decided to visit Lucia's apartment. He needed to understand more about her life, the life he should have been part of. The apartment building was old but clean. Lucia's neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, recognized him from the newspapers. So you're him, she said, looking at him with disapproval. Lucia used to look at your picture in the business section. Even after all those years, she never stopped loving you. Victor felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. What was she like at the end? Mrs. Chen's face softened a little. Brave. Even when she was so sick, she never complained. She just worried about the baby. She paused. She believed you would take care of him. Inside Lucia's apartment, Victor felt like he could barely breathe. Everything was simple but neat. There were books everywhere. She'd always loved reading. On the wall were pictures of her with her students all smiling. And then he saw it, a photo of him and Lucia from 15 years ago, tucked into the corner of a mirror. They looked so young, so happy. Next to it was a more recent photo of Lucia, holding newborn Gabriel. Victor picked up the baby photo with trembling hands. Lucia looked tired but radiant, smiling down at their son. How could he have let this happen? How could he have been so blind? His phone buzzed. Another message from Marcus Reynolds. Word is, you haven't been to the office in days. Board's calling an emergency meeting. Victor deleted the message without reading the rest. Let them talk. Let them worry. For the first time in his life, something mattered more than business. Back at the mansion, Gabriel was crying when Victor walked in. Rosa looked exhausted. He's been fussy all afternoon, she said. Maybe he's getting sick. Victor took Gabriel from her arms. Hey, little guy, what's wrong? To everyone's surprise, Gabriel stopped crying almost immediately. Well, look at that, Rosa smiled. He knows his father. Victor felt something warm in his chest. I went to your mum's place today, he told Gabriel softly. She loved books, you know, maybe we should read one. He found a children's book Rosa had bought and sat down in the rocking chair. His voice was shaky at first, but soon he found his rhythm. Once there was a little bear who lived in a big house. Gabriel looked up at him with those familiar eyes, Lucia's eyes, and Victor kept reading, even when his voice got thick with tears. Later that night, after Rosa had gone home, Victor sat in his study with Gabriel sleeping in his arms. His phone kept buzzing with messages from board members and business associates, all demanding to know what was going on. Finally, he sent one message to his secretary. Clear my schedule for the next month. Family emergency. Family. The word felt strange but right. On his desk, next to his computer, he placed the photo of Lucia with baby Gabriel. Then he took out his wallet and removed something he'd kept hidden for 15 years. A small photo of him and Lucia, torn and creased from being carried so long. He put the photos side by side and looked at his sleeping son. I was so wrong, he whispered. I thought success meant having the most money, the biggest company. But your mother, she was successful in all the ways that really matter. She touched people's lives. She loved completely. And now, he touched Gabriel's tiny hand. Now she's given me a chance to learn what real success means. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars. Somewhere out there, Marcus Reynolds and the board members were probably plotting against him. His business empire might be in danger. But here in this room holding his son, Victor Castelli finally understood what Lucia had known all along. Love was worth more than all the money in the world. Tomorrow he would face the board. Tomorrow he would start figuring out how to balance his new role as a father with his business responsibilities. Tomorrow he would begin the process of introducing Gabriel to the world. But tonight he just sat there holding his son, looking at Lucia's photos and letting himself feel all the love and regret and hope that had been locked away in his heart for 15 years. The morning of the board meeting, Victor woke up early. He'd spent the night in the nursery chair again, unable to leave Gabriel's side. His expensive suit was wrinkled and he hadn't shaved in days. Mr. Castelli, Rosa said, bringing him coffee, you need to get ready. The meeting is in 2 hours. Victor looked down at Gabriel, still sleeping peacefully. I don't want to leave. Him. He'll be here when you get back, Rosa promised. But right now you need to protect his future. Those vultures at your company, they're waiting for any excuse to take control. She was right. Victor showered and put on a fresh suit. As he fixed his tie in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. His eyes were different now, softer somehow. I'll be back soon, he whispered to Gabriel, kissing his forehead. The baby stirred but didn't wake up. When Victor walked into Castelli Tower, everyone stared. The security guard dropped his coffee cup. The receptionist's mouth fell open. Even the elevator operator couldn't hide his surprise. Good morning, Mr. Castelli, people mumbled as he passed. They weren't used to seeing their boss looking so human. Outside the boardroom, his new secretary, he'd hired her yesterday, rushed up to him. Sir, you should know, Mr. Reynolds is already in there with the board. They've been meeting for half an hour. Victor straightened his tie. Good. Let them talk. He pushed open the boardroom doors. 12 faces turned to look at him. Marcus. Reynolds was standing at the head of the table, Victor's usual spot. "Victor," Marcus said with fake cheerfulness, "we were just discussing the company's situation." "My spot, Marcus." Victor's voice was quiet but firm. Marcus hesitated, then moved aside. As Victor took his place at the head of the table, he could feel everyone watching him, waiting for an explanation. "I understand you're all concerned," Victor began. "Concerned?" Marcus interrupted. "You disappear for days, fire your assistant, cancel meetings. The stock price is already dropping. We need to know what's going on." Victor looked around the table. These people had worked with him for years, but did any of them really know him? Did he even know himself before Gabriel came into his life? "I recently received some news," Victor said carefully. "News that made me reevaluate my priorities." "Priorities?" Marcus scoffed. "Your only priority should be this company." Victor felt anger rising in his chest. "Like you've been prioritizing it, Marcus, by meeting secretly with our competitors, by trying to undermine me." Marcus's face went pale. Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "That's right," Victor continued. "I might have been away for a few days, but I still have eyes and ears everywhere. I know about your little plots." He pulled out a folder and tossed it on the table. Inside were photos of Marcus meeting with their biggest competitors, copies of emails discussing a hostile takeover. "You were going to use my absence to stage a coup," Victor said. "But you forgot something, Marcus. This is still my company." The boardroom was silent. Marcus looked like he was about to be sick. "Now," Victor stood up, "I'm going to tell you all something. I have a son." The announcement hit the room like a bomb. People started whispering, looking at each other in shock. "His mother was someone I loved many years ago before I built this company. She passed away recently, and now our son needs me. So yes, my priorities have changed, but that doesn't mean I'm stepping away from this company." He looked directly at Marcus. "It just means I now understand there are things more important than money and power, like family, like love, like being a decent human being." Marcus tried to laugh. "Love? Family? The Victor Castelli I know doesn't care about. The Victor Castelli you know is gone," Victor cut him off. "And Marcus, you're fired." Marcus's face turned red. "You can't fire me, I'm on the board." Victor smiled. "Check your contract. Article 7, Section 3. Any board member found conspiring with competitors can be immediately terminated. Clean out your office." As Marcus stormed out, Victor addressed the remaining board members. "I'll be working from home more often. I've already set up a home office with full video conferencing. My son needs me, and I won't miss any more moments of his life." He paused, looking each person in the eye. "But make no mistake, I'm still in charge. I'm just a different kind of leader now. One who understands that success isn't just about profit margins." The board members nodded, some looking thoughtful, others confused. But no one dared to argue. Back at the mansion, Victor rushed to the nursery. Gabriel was awake and his face lit up when he saw his father. "How was he?" Victor asked Rosa, picking up his son. "An angel," Rosa smiled. "He was waiting for you." Victor held Gabriel close, breathing in his baby smell. "I took care of everything at the office, little one. No one's going to threaten your future or our time together." That evening, as Victor fed Gabriel his bottle, he thought about how much his life had changed in just a few days. The old Victor would have been worried about the stock price, about what people were saying, about his reputation. But now, looking at his son's innocent face, none of that seemed to matter. The empire he'd built would still be there tomorrow. Right now, this moment with his son was everything. His phone buzzed. Messages from board members pledging their support. Business news alerts about Marcus Reynolds' sudden departure. Requests for interviews about the new direction of Castelli Enterprises. Victor ignored them all. Instead, he started telling Gabriel a story. Once upon a time, there was a man who thought he had everything, but he was wrong. He didn't have anything that really mattered. And then one day, a very special delivery arrived in his garden. Gabriel cooed, reaching up to touch his father's face with tiny fingers. "That's right," Victor smiled, tears in his eyes. "That's when everything changed. That's when life really began." The story hit the newspapers the next morning. Billionaire's secret baby, screamed the headlines. Reporters camped outside the mansion gates, hoping to get the first photo of Victor Castelli's son. "Mr. Castelli," Rosa said, closing the curtains. Against the camera flashes, "They're not going away. Maybe you should give them a statement." Victor was sitting in the nursery, feeding Gabriel his morning bottle. "Let them talk. We don't owe them anything." But then his phone rang. It was Maria Torres, his head of public relations. "Victor, we need to get ahead of this story," Maria said. "People are digging into Lucia's past. They're going to find everything. Out anyway. Let me arrange a proper interview. Something dignified." Victor looked down at Gabriel, who was falling asleep in his arms. "Arrange it. But here, at the mansion. And I choose the reporter." That's how Sarah Chen from the City Times ended up sitting in Victor's study 3 days later. She was young, but she had a reputation for being fair. "Mr. Castelli," Sarah began, "the public is very curious about your sudden transformation. What changed?" Victor had prepared for this moment. He looked at the photo of Lucia on his desk. "Love changed me," he said simply. 15 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I chose money over love. I left the only woman who ever truly loved me, Lucia Martinez." Sarah leaned forward. "Gabriel's mother?" "Yes. She was a schoolteacher, the kindest, most genuine person I've ever known. But I was young and ambitious. I thought I needed to choose between love and success." Just then, Gabriel started crying in the next room. Victor stood up immediately. "Excuse me," he said to Sarah. "My son needs me." Sarah watched in amazement as Victor Castelli, the man known as the Ice King of Wall Street, hurried to comfort his crying baby. When he came back, he was carrying Gabriel. The baby was calm now, playing with Victor's tie. "This is what matters now," Victor said softly. "Not the money, not the company. Just being the father he deserves." Sarah's article came out the next day. It wasn't the scandal piece everyone expected. Instead, it was a story about love, loss, and redemption, about a man learning to be a father, about second chances. But not everyone was moved by the story. At a downtown restaurant, Marcus Reynolds met with Diana Blackwood, Victor's ex-fiancée from 5 years ago. "Did you read this nonsense?" Marcus pushed the newspaper across the table. "Victor Castelli, devoted father. Please." Diana's perfectly manicured nails tapped the table. "It's disgusting. He never wanted children when we were together. Said they'd interfere with his work." Marcus smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "What if we could prove he's an unfit father? That would destroy his new family man image. The board would have to remove him." Diana's eyes sparkled with interest. "Tell me more." Back at the mansion, Victor was meeting with Mrs. Chen, Lucia's former neighbor. She'd brought over some of Lucia's things. "She would have wanted Gabriel to have these," Mrs. Chen said, opening a box. Inside were photo albums, journals, and a stuffed bear Lucia had bought when she first found out she was pregnant. "Did she suffer?" Victor asked quietly. "At the end?" Mrs. Chen's eyes filled with tears. "She was brave, so brave. Her only worry was Gabriel." She paused. "And you? Me?" "She worried you wouldn't open your heart to him, that you were too far gone into your world of money and power." Mrs. Chen looked at him carefully. "But I see now she was right to believe in you." Victor picked up one of Lucia's journals. I wish I could tell her how sorry I am, how much I regret." "Then tell your son," Mrs. Chen said gently. "Show him every day through your love." That's what Lucia would have wanted. Later that evening, Victor sat in the garden with Gabriel. The reporters were finally gone, but their peace wouldn't last long. Victor knew Marcus Reynolds wouldn't give up easily. "Your mother loved this garden," he told Gabriel. "She used to say that flowers were like people. They needed love and care to grow properly." Gabriel reached for a red rose, and Victor carefully helped him touch the soft petals. "I'm learning, son. Learning what your mother always knew. That love isn't a weakness. It's the greatest strength we have." Rosa watched from the kitchen window, smiling, but her smile faded when she saw the evening newspaper. There was a small article that worried her. Sources close to Castelli Enterprises question Victor Castelli's ability to balance fatherhood with his corporate responsibilities. Former fiancée Diana Blackwood expected to make statement. Rosa decided not to show it to Victor. Not tonight. Tonight, let him have this peaceful moment with his son. In the garden, Victor was pointing out the stars to Gabriel. See that bright one? Your mother used to say that stars were like promises. They might seem far away, but they're always there, watching over us. He held Gabriel closer. I promise. You, son, I'll always be here. No matter what happens, no matter who tries to come between us, I'll always choose you. I'll be the father you deserve. The man your mother always believed I could be. Gabriel yawned and snuggled against his father's chest. Above them, the stars twinkled like distant promises. And somewhere, Victor liked to think, Lucia was watching, over them both, finally at peace. Diana Blackwood's press conference was carefully staged. She wore a conservative black dress and dabbed at her eyes with a delicate handkerchief as she faced the cameras. I'm speaking out today because I'm concerned, she said, her voice trembling perfectly. The Victor Castelli I knew was obsessed with work. He couldn't even keep a dinner date, let alone care for a child. The reporters leaned forward, hungry for more scandal. And this poor baby, Diana continued, suddenly thrust into Victor's world of business meetings and corporate takeovers. Is that any way for a child to grow up? At the mansion, Victor watched the press conference on TV, holding Gabriel close. The baby was playing with a stuffed bear, the one Lucia had bought for him. Mr. Castelli, Rosa rushed in. You need to see this, they're outside again. Through the windows, Victor could see reporters gathering at the gates. But there was something else. Social services workers. They're saying they received complaints, Rosa said worriedly, about Gabriel's care. Victor felt his heart race, but he kept his voice calm for Gabriel's sake. Call Maria from PR and get my lawyer here. Now. The next few hours were chaos. Social services wanted to inspect the nursery, check their records of Gabriel's care, interview Rosa. Victor cooperated with everything, keeping Gabriel with him the whole time. The baby seemed to sense the tension, clinging to his father more than usual. Mr. Castelli, the social worker said, looking around the perfectly equipped nursery, I have to ask, how do you balance your corporate responsibilities with caring for an infant? Victor looked her straight in the eye. I don't balance them. Gabriel comes first, always. I've set up my home office right next to the nursery. I take video calls while he naps. I've rearranged my entire life around his needs. The social worker made some notes. And the mother? Can you tell me about her? Victor's voice softened. Lucia Martinez, she was... He paused, emotion catching in his throat. She was the best person I ever knew. A teacher. She loved children, loved helping others. Everything I'm learning about being a good parent, I learned from her example. He showed the social worker Lucia's journals, the photo albums, the little notes she'd written about her pregnancy and her hopes for Gabriel's future. The social worker's expression changed as she read. These are beautiful, she said softly. She really loved him. Yes, Victor said, and I'm trying every day to be worthy of the trust she placed in me. Just then, Gabriel started fussing. Without thinking, Victor immediately knew what he needed. It's time for his bottle, he said, already preparing it exactly the way Gabriel liked. The social worker watched as Victor expertly fed his son, talking softly to him, wiping his chin, burping him with practiced care. You know, she said, when we get these kinds of complaints, we usually find career-focused parents who delegate everything to nannies. But you? She smiled. You're actually doing this yourself. Of course I am, Victor said. He's my son. After the social workers left, Maria from PR arrived with more news. Diana's going on another talk show tomorrow, and Marcus Reynolds is helping her. He's been spreading rumors to the business papers about the company suffering. Victor looked down at Gabriel, now sleeping peacefully in his arms. Let them talk, we have nothing to hide. But Maria wasn't finished. There's something else. Diana, she's claiming you were still engaged to her when you got Lucia pregnant. She's trying to paint you as unfaithful, untrustworthy. Victor's face hardened. That's a lie, Lucia and I, it was 15 years ago. long before I ever met Diana. We need to fight back, Maria said. Let me arrange some interviews, show the real you. No, Victor said firmly. No more interviews, but I do have another idea. The next morning, Victor walked into Lucia's old elementary school. Gabriel was with him, dressed in a tiny blue outfit that had been Lucia's favorite color. The principal, Mrs. Rodriguez, was waiting for them. She'd worked with Lucia for years. The children are very excited, she said, leading them to Lucia's old classroom. They miss her so much. Victor had arranged to meet with Lucia's former students and their parents. As he walked into the classroom carrying Gabriel, the room fell silent. Hello, he said softly. I'm Victor, and this is Gabriel. Lucia said, Son, I wanted to meet the people who meant so much to her. One little girl raised her hand. Miss Martinez used to talk about you sometimes. She kept your picture on her desk. Victor felt tears in his eyes. Did she? What did she say about me? She said you were lost, the girl answered innocently, but that someday you'd find your way back. The parents were filming everything on their phones. By that evening, the videos were all over social media. Victor Castelli, billionaire CEO, sitting on a tiny classroom chair, letting Lucia's students meet her baby, listening to their stories about their beloved teacher. The narrative began to shift. For every nasty comment Diana made on TV, there were dozens of parents and teachers sharing stories about Lucia's kindness, her dedication, her belief in love and second chances. Back at the mansion that night, Victor read one of Lucia's journals while Gabriel slept nearby. I hope someday, he read in Lucia's familiar handwriting, our son knows that real strength isn't about money or power. It's about having the courage to love completely, to be vulnerable, to choose what's right over what's easy. He looked at their sleeping son and whispered, I understand now, Lucia. I finally understand. Outside, Diana and Marcus were still plotting, still trying to destroy him, but they didn't understand. They were using the old weapons, scandal, reputation, stock prices. They didn't realize that Victor Castelli wasn't that man anymore. The man he was now found his strength in, his son's smile in Lucia's memory, in the simple truth that love was worth more than all the money in the world. Gabriel stirred in his sleep, reaching out with one tiny hand. Victor caught it gently. Sweet dreams, my son, he whispered. Daddy's here, and I'm not going anywhere. Diana Blackwood slammed the morning newspaper down on Marcus Reynolds' desk. Her perfectly manicured nails were chipped, the first sign that her composure was cracking. Look at this, she hissed. Billionaire father shows true colors. They're calling him a hero, a role model. Marcus barely glanced at the paper. He was too busy studying an old file, one that had taken a lot of money and even more threats to obtain. Calm down, he said. I think I found something. Something big. At the mansion, Victor was having breakfast with Gabriel in the garden. The baby was growing faster than he could believe, already trying to reach for everything, exploring the world with curious eyes. Just like your mother, Victor smiled, watching Gabriel study a butterfly that had landed nearby. She was always curious about everything too. Rosa came out with more coffee and a worried look. Mr. Castelli, there's something you should know. Mrs. Chen is here. She says it's urgent. Lucia's former neighbor looked years older than she had just days ago. Her hands shook as she sat down. I should have told you this before, she said, but Lucia made me promise to keep it secret. Victor felt his heart skip. What is it? Near the end, when she was very sick, a man came to see her. He offered her money, a lot of money, to have an abortion. Victor's coffee cup crashed to the ground. What? She refused, of course, Mrs. Chen continued, but he kept coming back, offering more money each time. He said having this baby would ruin everything. Who? Victor's voice was barely a whisper. Who was it? He said he worked for you, that you had sent him. Victor felt like he couldn't breathe. Gabriel reached for him, sensing his father's distress, and Victor held him close. I would never, we know that now, Mrs. Chen said gently. But at the time, Lucia was so sick, so vulnerable. The man showed her papers, contracts with your company's letterhead. What was his name? Mrs. Chen pulled out an old business card. Michael Barnes. He said he was your personal attorney. Victor's face went white. Barnes? But he worked for... Oh God. He grabbed his phone and called Maria from PR. I need everything you can find on Michael Barnes, especially anything connecting him to Marcus Reynolds. While he waited for information, Victor read more of Lucia's journals, looking for any mention of Barnes. He found it in one of her last entries. The man came again today. He says Victor doesn't want this baby, that it would destroy everything he's built. But I don't believe it. The Victor I knew, the real Victor, beneath all that ambition, would never hurt an innocent child. Maybe I'm foolish to still believe in that man, but I do. And someday when he holds our son, I know he'll understand what really matters in life. Tears fell onto the journal pages. Even when someone claiming to represent him was trying to eliminate their child, Lucia had still believed in him. Maria called back within an hour. Barnes worked for Reynolds Holdings until 3 months ago. He specialized in making problems go away. Find him, Victor said. Whatever it costs, find him. But Barnes had vanished. His apartment was empty, his phone disconnected. He'd withdrawn all his money and disappeared. Victor was putting Gabriel down for his nap when his lawyer arrived with more news. We found the paperwork, she said. Barnes forged your signature on documents authorizing payments to handle the Lucia Martinez situation. But he made a mistake. He dated one document for a day you were giving a televised speech in Tokyo. Can we prove Reynolds was behind it? We're working on it, but Victor, there's something else. Barnes didn't just try to pay Lucia off, he threatened her. Victor's hands clenched into fists. What kind of threats? He told her if she had the baby, he would make sure you lost everything, that your enemies would use the scandal to destroy your company. She wrote it all down in a letter to her lawyer, to be opened only if something happened to her or the baby. Victor looked at Gabriel, sleeping peacefully. She faced all that alone. While I was busy making more money, buying more companies, she was fighting to protect our son. Just then, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a video, grainy security camera footage showing Marcus Reynolds meeting with Michael Barnes months ago. At the bottom was a message, I can't live with what we did to her. Meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m. City Park. I'll tell you everything. Barnes Victor's lawyer studied the video. It could be a trap. Of course it's a trap, Victor said. Reynolds and Diana are getting desperate. But maybe that's exactly what we need. He called Maria and told her to alert every media outlet in the city. Tell them Victor Castelli will be making a major announcement at City Park tomorrow at 10 a.m. Every reporter, every camera. I want the whole world watching. That night, as Victor read Gabriel his bedtime story, he felt a strange peace. Tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. Your mother was the bravest person I've ever known, he told his sleeping son. She stood up to powerful men who tried to bully her, who tried to make her give you up. She believed in love more than money, in truth more than power. He touched Gabriel's tiny hand. And now it's my turn to be brave, to show the world what she taught me, that love is the greatest power of all. Outside the mansion gates, reporters were already gathering, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Diana Blackwood was preparing her most devastating interview yet. Marcus Reynolds was meeting with his lawyers, but none of them understood what they were really fighting against. They were using weapons of money and power and scandal against something much stronger. A father's love, a mother's legacy, and the simple truth that real wealth isn't counted in dollars. In his crib, Gabriel slept on, surrounded by his mother's stuffed bear and his father's love, while the stars twinkled overhead like distant promises waiting to be kept. The morning of the City Park meeting dawned clear and bright. Victor dressed Gabriel in the blue outfit Lucia had bought for him, the one she'd never gotten to see him wear. Whatever happens today, he told his son, remember that your mother was the bravest person in the world. And I'm finally learning to be brave too. Rosa came in with worry on her face. The park is packed with reporters, and Mr. Reynolds is already there with his lawyers, Miss Blackwood too. Good, Victor said. Let them all be there. It's time. Everyone knew the truth. He kissed Gabriel's forehead and handed him to Rosa. Take care of him. I'll be back soon. Be careful. Rosa said, holding Gabriel close. "Those people, they're dangerous." "Not anymore," Victor smiled. "They only have power if we let fear win. Lucia taught me that." The scene at City Park was chaos. Hundreds of reporters crowded around the central plaza. Television cameras pointed in every direction. Marcus Reynolds stood with his lawyers, looking confident. Diana Blackwood posed for photographers in another designer black dress. At exactly 10 a.m., Victor walked into the park. The crowd fell silent. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice carrying across the plaza. "I'm here today to tell a story about love and greed and a brave woman named Lucia Martinez." He pulled out Lucia's journal and began to read her words about Michael Barnes's visits, about the threats, about her determination to protect their child. "While I was counting my millions," Victor's voice cracked, "the woman I loved was fighting alone against people who claimed to represent me, people who tried to bribe her, threaten her, force her to give up our child." Marcus Reynolds stepped forward. "This is ridiculous. You can't prove any of this." "Actually, he can." The new voice came from behind the crowd. Michael Barnes walked forward, looking pale and nervous. "Mr. Barnes," Victor said calmly. "Right on time." Marcus's face went white. Diana dropped her designer handbag. Barnes walked to the center of the plaza. "I can't live with it anymore," he said into the forest of microphones. "Mr. Reynolds hired me to make Ms. Martinez's pregnancy. Go away. When money didn't work, he ordered me to threaten her, to forge documents in Mr. Castelli's name." The crowd erupted. Cameras flashed everywhere. "You fool," Marcus shouted. "Think about what you're doing." "I am thinking," Barnes said. "For the first time in years, I'm thinking clearly. Ms. Martinez was dying, and we made her last months a nightmare. But she never gave up. She believed in love more than money." Victor stepped forward. "Marcus Reynolds and Diana Blackwood thought they could use my son against me. They thought love was weakness. But Lucia knew better. She always knew better." He turned to face Diana. "You claimed I was engaged to you when Gabriel was conceived. But Gabriel is 15 years old. I didn't even know you then. You lied, Diana, just like you've been lying about everything." Diana's perfect composure cracked. "You left me for your precious company. You said children would just get in the way, and now you're playing devoted father." "You're right," Victor said quietly. "I was wrong about so many things. But Lucia's love and her faith in me and our son, they changed everything." He pulled out his phone and played a video, security footage showing Marcus meeting with Barnes, planning their campaign against Lucia. "I've already sent copies of this to the police," Victor announced, "along with proof of the forged documents, the threats, everything." Marcus lunged forward, but security guards appeared from the crowd to hold him back. In the distance, police sirens wailed. "You'll regret this, Castelli," Marcus shouted as officers led him away. "I'll destroy you." "No," Victor said calmly. "You can't. Because you never understood what real strength is. Lucia taught me that strength isn't about money or power. It's about love, about doing what's right, about being the kind of person your child can be proud of." Diana tried to slip away, but police officers stopped her too. Her perfect mask crumbled as they led her to a waiting car. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but Victor wasn't finished. He had one more thing to say. Lucia Martinez was a teacher. She taught children about kindness, about truth, about love, and in the end she taught me the most important lesson of all, that real wealth isn't in bank accounts or stock portfolios. It's in the love we give and receive. He looked up at the clear blue sky. "So today I'm announcing the creation of the Lucia Martinez Foundation. Half of my personal fortune will go to helping single parents, supporting education, and making sure no mother ever has to face what Lucia faced alone." The crowd erupted in applause. Phones captured every word. On live television across the country, people watched as Victor Castelli, once known as the coldest man in business, spoke about love, redemption, and the power of truth. Back at the mansion, Rosa wiped tears from her eyes as she watched it, all on TV. Gabriel reached for the screen when his father appeared, like he knew this was all for him. "Your mama would be so proud," Rosa told the baby, "of both of you." Hours later, Victor came home exhausted, but at peace. Gabriel was waiting. For him, arms reaching out. "Hello, my son," Victor whispered, holding him close. "We did it. We showed them that love is stronger than hate. That truth is more powerful than lies, just like your mother always believed." In his study that night, Victor added a new photo, next to the ones of Lucia. A picture of Gabriel wearing her favorite blue outfit, smiling at the camera with her eyes. "Thank you, Lucia," he whispered, "for believing in me, for giving me our son, for teaching me what really matters." Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, and somewhere Victor was sure Lucia was smiling. The weeks following the City Park confrontation changed everything. Marcus Reynolds and Diana Blackwood faced criminal charges for their scheme against Lucia. The business world buzzed with the story, but not in the way Victor's enemies had hoped. Instead of scandal, people talked about redemption, about the power of love to change even the coldest heart. One morning, Victor sat in his home office, Gabriel playing with blocks on the floor beside him, when Maria from PR brought in the latest newspapers. "You might want to see these," she smiled. The headlines were different now. Castelli's revolution, putting family first, and how a baby and a brave mother changed business forever. But Victor barely glanced at them. He was too busy watching Gabriel stack blocks into wobbly towers. "Watch this, Maria," he said proudly, as Gabriel managed to stack 5 blocks before they tumbled down. The baby laughed, clapping his hands. "You know," Maria said, "when you first told me about Gabriel, I thought it would destroy the company. Instead," she gestured at the papers, "you've started a movement. Other CEOs are following your lead, creating family-friendly policies, starting charitable foundations." "Say it's what Lucia would have wanted," Victor said softly. "She always saw the best in everyone, even me when I couldn't see it myself." The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Castelli, Mrs. Chen is here with some visitors." Victor picked up Gabriel and went downstairs. In the living room, he found Mrs. Chen with a group of Lucia's former students, now teenagers, and their parents. "We wanted you to have this," one of the mothers said, holding out a beautifully bound book. Inside were hundreds of stories about Lucia, memories from students, parents, and fellow teachers. Pictures of her in her classroom, at school events, always with that bright smile Victor remembered so well. "She changed all our lives," Mrs. Chen said. "And now, through you and Gabriel, she's still changing." "Lives!" Victor had to sit down, overwhelmed by emotion. Gabriel reached for the book, patting the pictures of his mother with tiny hands. "That's right, son," Victor whispered. "That's your mama, the most beautiful person in the world, inside and out." Later that day, Victor took Gabriel to visit Lucia's grave for the first time. He'd been nervous about this moment, but as he stood there with their son in his arms, he felt a deep sense of peace. The gravestone was simple, just as Lucia would have wanted, but it was surrounded by fresh flowers, not just from Victor, but from her students, her neighbors, all the lives she'd touched. "Look, Gabriel," Victor said softly, "all these flowers are for your mama, because she loved so many people, and they loved her back." Gabriel reached out toward the stone, making the gentle cooing sounds that always reminded Victor of Lucia's laugh. "I wish you could see him, Lucia," Victor said, tears in his eyes. "He has your curious spirit, your loving heart. Every day he teaches me something new about love, just like you did." A warm breeze rustled the flowers, and Gabriel smiled at something over Victor's shoulder. For a moment, Victor could almost feel Lucia's presence, warm and loving as ever. When they got home, Rosa was waiting with exciting news. "He said his first word while you were gone." "What?" Victor felt a pang of disappointment at missing it. "What did he say?" "Watch," Rosa said. She picked up the photo of Lucia that always sat on the mantel. "Gabriel, who's this?" "Mama," Gabriel said clearly, reaching for the picture. Victor felt his heart swell so much it hurt. He pulled out his phone and recorded Gabriel saying it again and again, each mama more precious than gold. That night, as he rocked Gabriel to sleep, Victor told him stories about Lucia. Not just the sad parts about losing her, but the happy memories how they met, their first date, the way she could find joy in the smallest things. "Your mother once told me that love was like a garden," he said softly. "It needs care and attention to grow, but if you nurture it properly, it blooms forever." Gabriel drifted off to sleep, still holding the photo of Lucia. Victor carried him to the nursery, which he'd redecorated with pictures of Lucia everywhere. He wanted Gabriel to grow up knowing his mother's face, her smile, her spirit. In his study later, Victor worked on plans for the Lucia Martinez Foundation. The first project would be renovating her old school, creating a state-of-the-art learning center for underprivileged children. There would be a scholarship program too, and support services for single parents. "The board of directors meeting is tomorrow," Maria reminded him via video call. "They'll want to know how you plan to balance all this charitable work with running the company." Victor looked at the latest photo of Gabriel on his desk, his son's laughing face worth more than all the money in his accounts. "Tell them what Lucia taught me," he said, "that the biggest returns don't show up on balance sheets. They show up in the lives we touch, the love we share, the legacy we leave behind." After the call, Victor went to check on Gabriel one more. Tea time. His son slept peacefully, surrounded by pictures of the mother who had loved him so much she'd faced down the most powerful men in the city to protect him. "Sweet dreams, my boy," Victor whispered. "Tomorrow is another day to make your mama proud." Outside, the moon cast a gentle light over Lucia's beloved garden, where roses bloomed despite the changing seasons. Just like love, Victor thought, blooming forever when properly nurtured. He touched the journal he always carried now, Lucia's last gift to him, filled with her hopes and dreams for their son. On the last page, she'd written words that now guided his every decision. "Love is the only legacy that truly matters. Money fades, power crumbles, but love blooms eternal in the garden of the heart." 1 year had passed since the day Victor found Gabriel in his garden. The roses were blooming again, their sweet scent filling the morning air. Victor sat on a bench, watching his son take wobbly steps through the grass, each step stronger than the last. "Just like that, Gabriel," Victor encouraged. "You can do it." Gabriel turned toward his father's voice and managed 3 steps before falling softly onto the grass. Instead of crying, he laughed. That bright, joyful laugh that sounded so much like Lucia's. "Mr. Castelli," Rosa called from the doorway, "they're ready for you at the school." Today was the grand opening of the Lucia Martinez Learning Center. Victor had transformed her old elementary school into a modern facility that would serve thousands of children. But more importantly, it would keep Lucia's spirit of love and kindness alive. "Ready to go see Mama's school?" Victor asked, picking up Gabriel. "Mama," Gabriel said, pointing at the sky. He did that sometimes, as if he could see something, or someone, that others couldn't. The school was packed with people, former students, parents, teachers, and reporters. The building was beautiful, with bright classrooms, a state-of-the-art library, and a garden in the center, just like the one Lucia had always dreamed of creating. Mrs. Chen met them at the entrance, tears in her eyes. "She would have loved this," she said, touching the plaque that bore Lucia's name. Mrs. Rodriguez, the principal, stepped up to the microphone to begin the ceremony. But before she could speak, something unexpected happened. Marcus Reynolds' wife walked through the crowd holding a small package. The room went silent. Everyone knew Marcus was in jail, awaiting trial for his crimes against Lucia. His wife, Patricia, had never spoken publicly about the scandal. "Mr. Castelli," she said, her voice shaking, "I found these in Marcus's office. I think they belong to you." Inside the package were letters, dozens of them, all from Lucia, written during her pregnancy. Letters that Marcus had intercepted, never allowing them to reach Victor. "I'm so sorry," Patricia said. "Marcus, he was so consumed by greed. But seeing you with your son, seeing how love changed you, I couldn't keep these hidden anymore." Victor's hands trembled as he opened the first letter. Lucia's words, written when she first learned she was pregnant, jumped off the page. "Dear Victor, today I found out we're having a baby. I know you're different now, focused on your business empire. But I remember the man who used to talk about making the world better, who dreamed of using success to help others. That's the man I fell in love with. That's the man I believe is still inside you. And that's the man I hope our child will know. Victor had to sit down, overwhelmed by emotion. Gabriel patted his father's cheeks, wiping away tears with tiny hands. "Mama?" he asked, seeing her photo on the wall. "Yes, son," Victor whispered. "Your mama never lost faith in me, even when I lost faith in myself." The ceremony began, not just celebrating the new learning center, but honoring Lucia's legacy. Former students shared stories about her kindness. Parents talked about how she'd helped their children believe in themselves. Teachers spoke about her dedication to making the world better, one child at a time. Victor stood up to give his speech, holding Gabriel in his arms. "1 year ago, I thought I had everything," he began. "Money, power, success, but I had nothing that really mattered. Then Lucia sent me our son, and with him, the greatest gift of all, the chance to remember who I really was, who I could be." He looked at Gabriel, who was playing with his tie just like that first day in his office. This learning center isn't just about education. It's about Lucia's belief that love is the greatest force for change in the world. Every child who walks through these doors will learn what she taught me, that true wealth isn't in bank accounts, it's in the hearts we touch and the lives we make better. After the ceremony, Victor took Gabriel to visit Lucia's grave. The simple stone was now surrounded by a beautiful garden, always blooming with her favorite flowers. "Look what you started, Lucia," Victor said softly. "Your love is still changing. Lives, still making the world better." Gabriel placed a rose on the grave, something he'd learned to do on their regular visits. Then he pointed at the sky again, smiling that special smile that made Victor's heart ache with joy and grief at the same time. Back home that evening, Victor read Gabriel a bedtime story from one of Lucia's old books. The baby fell asleep, holding the stuffed bear his mother had bought for him, surrounded by photos of her smiling face. In his study later, Victor read through more of Lucia's letters, each one filled with love, hope, and faith in the man she'd always believed he could be. The man he'd finally become thanks to her and their son. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Victor watched the sunrise from the garden bench, Gabriel babbling happily in his lap. The roses Lucia had loved so much were opening their petals to the new day. "Your mother was right, son," Victor said, watching a butterfly land on a nearby flower. "Love is the only legacy that truly matters, and thanks to her, we'll always know how to keep that legacy alive." Gabriel reached up toward the sky, laughing that laugh that sounded so much like Lucia's. And in that moment, as the morning sun painted the garden in shades of gold, Victor felt a perfect peace. He had finally come full circle. From the ambitious young man who chose money over love, to the cold businessman who had everything but nothing that mattered, to this, a father, keeping Lucia's legacy of love alive through their son. "Thank you, Lucia," he whispered to the morning air, "for believing in me, for giving me our son, for teaching me that love isn't weakness, it's the greatest strength of all." Gabriel snuggled against his chest, sighing contentedly. Above them, the sky was the same brilliant blue as Lucia's favorite dress, and somewhere Victor knew she was smiling down on their little family. In the end, love had won. Not the way anyone expected, but exactly the way Lucia had always believed it would. Through a baby left in a garden, through letters finally delivered, through a man learning to open his heart again. And in that garden where it all began, where love had come full circle, Victor held their son close and made one final promise to Lucia's memory: "Your love changed everything, and will keep it blooming forever." The end.